Hello, I'm Ryan Cook, and this is Civic Tech Chat, a show that looks at the way technology, politics, and policy impacts the world around us. The tools we use, the way services are delivered, and how we talk about and set policy all shape our society. We'll gather around and have a chat about these things together and more. For this episode, I'm grateful to Nava PBC for their support and partnership. They were kind enough to go ahead and sponsor this one. So I'm excited both for that collaboration, as well as this interesting conversation we have ahead about the design and research field and its future. Sanango, thank you so much for joining us here on Civic Tech Chat. Could you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Sunong Bem. I'm the VP of Design at Nava. My job has a lot of different pieces to it, but I think broadly I'm responsible for leading Nava's design and research practice. So our design org right now is about 100 staff. That's made up of designer researchers, content strategists. We have front-end designers, communications designers, and we work across federal, state, and a bunch of internal projects as well. So a lot of what I do is collaborate at the delivery organization level. So I'm working with practice leadership, right, product and program, project management, engineering leaders, and making sure that we're delivering for our clients. There's a bunch of internal business objectives and execution at the company level that I focus on as well. But I think more tactically, the work that I'm doing and what I am focused on currently is just making sure that we're building differentiated, we're building delivery focused teams, teams that are focused on our mission, that are focused on our government clients' mission, and that's to make government services simple and effective. So there's a lot of stuff within that, right? That could be mentoring senior leadership. It could be helping designers with their growth and development. Maybe sometimes even scrubbing into billable work, which is a fun thing in and of itself. So yeah, I've been fortunate to be able to do a bunch of that stuff over the years, and a lot of what I've been able to focus on is like building creative teams, right? Building design teams, and just delivering for our clients. And because we have so many critical programs, and the weight of that responsibility is pretty heavy, but yeah, it's fun. Other than that, I'm the author of Cross-Cultural Design. It's a book that I wrote in 2020, and that's providing a clear and accessible methodology for designing across cultures. So lots of great stuff in there, and another kind of personal thing that I'm pretty proud of.
What would you say is your personal why? That thing that drives you to get out of bed each morning and do all those things?
I love the practice of design, right? The thing of it, whether it's a capital D or not. There's so many different forms to it. It's just really an interesting topic. Every week there's some new technique, right? Maybe somebody on the design team publishes an article about a way to look at human-centered design or something that they delivered. And yeah, that's all pretty cool. I've been a designer for 20 years now. That doesn't feel real, but it is. And in that time, as you can imagine, like all sorts of fads, different software, social communities online, different platforms. Like there's been a bunch of stuff that's come and gone. So the why for me these days, like I want to be able to create more space for other designers to thrive, for them to build their portfolios in the same way that I did when I was younger, ways for them to contribute their ideas and their work and so on. Especially now, I think that the pathways through and into the design industry can be pretty opaque. And so, yeah, just overall wanting to set some conditions for other designers to navigate their own careers and be successful and like create that impactful work. So I guess that's probably why I gravitate towards spaces like Nava, spaces like this, where people do care about designing for the benefit of others. And because at Nava, we're designing for things like public benefits, critical safety net programs. Like there's an effect on millions and millions of people in some cases. So in my own little way, right, the why is I want to help other people navigate those decisions and navigate that world and that type of design.
With your family's diverse background and your experience living in multiple countries, you've had a unique exposure to an assortment of cultures and how they interact with each other. How has all of this shaped your worldview?
I'm a third culture kid. I'll explain what that means. My dad is Nigerian. My mother was Dutch American. I grew up in Nigeria and I had stints back and forth in the US and Michigan and so on. I also lived in Japan for almost 8 years, and now I live in Queens. Queens is, I think, one of the most diverse communities in America. There's, 100, almost 200 languages spoken here. For me, like living in between and beside all of these different cultures, that's been completely normal throughout my life, which isn't the same for everyone. Yeah, you were asking before about the why. Like, I'll just talk a little bit about my parents because I think that's an important, facet to this. So my mom, she was the child of migrants, immigrants, and she grew up in an orange farm in Central California. And she became an anesthesiologist in the late 1950s. And then she left. She moved to Nigeria, year of independence. That was 1960. Um, and when she was young, she did stuff like circumnavigate the globe. She went from Nigeria to Ethiopia to Jordan, East Asia, etc., and then all the way back to California again. She used to drive around Nigeria on this Yamaha motorbike in the 60s. Like we got pictures of it. And she met my dad working at the Benue leprosy settlement, and that was where she was working. So they later got married, right? And that was one of the first interracial marriages in Nigeria at the time. That was like the early 70s. And yeah, so later on at the Benue leprosy settlement, she started one of the first occupational rehabilitation practices in Nigeria. And later on in her life, she was an artist in Michigan. So a very varied career, probably reflecting some of the things that I've done as well. And then my dad, for his part, like he grew up in central Nigeria, dusty little village called Shangevtiev. When he was 12, maybe 13 years old, something like that, he ran away from home, which is a whole story that's too long to tell now, but pretty amazing. And he ran away to go to the white missionary school, which was like 2 days away by foot. He learned English there, right? He became a pastor, and then he got a job at the leprosy settlement. So that's where he met my mom. And after they got married, like they started a hospital together. They raised me and my sisters in Nigeria. They started an orange farm, which is a little bit poetic because that's where my mom grew up. My dad wrote a bunch of books. He's a mentor to a bunch of generations of pastors in Nigeria. And he was like moving back and forth between Nigeria and the US. So I think I get that wanderlust from them. You can kind of hear it in their stories. Just getting to live in those different parts of the world. That's a lot of exposure to those like shifting cultural kind of physical spaces. And yeah, I'd like to hope that my own design practice and the stuff that I do, it comes from them and it comes from the experiences that they raised me in.
Is there anything from that experience that, and how that shaped you, their experiences kind of them being passed into you that you wish you could just sort of like magic wand have more people just sort of innately understand?
Mm. I think the idea that it's all relative is a really interesting one. I don't know how to put that exactly, but being able to view experiences through the lens of the person who's living it, understanding that, cultural perspectives are not set, but they are quite flexible and they really just depend on so many different factors. I went to a friend's house in Ohio once when I was in college, and they pointed out this huge oak tree in their front yard. And they said when their parents had moved into the house, they had planted that tree. And to me, thinking growing up in one place your entire life in Dayton, Ohio, this is wild. Like that is a certain cultural experience that I never had any access to. But that is, in relation to what I experienced, I think a pretty interesting contrast. So just being mindful of that was something that they taught me.
You yourself have a storied and rather interesting career. I think in your answer you mentioned that you've hit the 2 decade mark, as wild as that is for creating meaningful digital experiences. Along that path, you've been a design director, an art director, an author, and now a VP at Nava. What are some things you've learned along that path?
Yes, it has been 20 years. We don't need to remind ourselves that, right? My first job was not in design at all. I started my first real full-time job as an English teacher. I was a teacher in Japan. And then later on, I was a teacher trainer. I lived in Kyoto, which is a very old city. And that was before I ever really imagined that I was going to become a designer. I didn't really have that in my mind. that job, being a teacher, being a trainer, it taught me a bunch of stuff that I still use today. Clear communication, right? How to think on your feet, how to adapt the things that you need to present or your ideas and your thoughts for different audiences, sometimes simultaneously, and the basics of client services, needing to know how to make your clients happy and what they're interested in, and then also how to train and develop staff who are under you. And that one, the last thing in particular, I think that's really important to me. And what I have tried to focus on as a design leader is what are the ways to cultivate the team around me to like build their skills, help them build their portfolio of work. That's always been really important. Um, and maybe another thing, I don't know if it's a learning necessarily, an approach, maybe. Um, for the folks who know me, they'll know that I joke around. I like to have a laugh, tell bad dad jokes and puns and so on. Um, Acknowledging that working in mission-driven work can be really heavy. It can be really big impacts and real just critically important failings in government sometimes that we're helping to mitigate. And there's lots of people design depending on like the design choices that we make. So it's a pretty heavy burden sometimes. And because of that, I'm trying to hold things lightly, even though they are heavy, not to take myself too seriously as a counterpoint to some of that weight. And yeah, just generally like try and have a laugh at yourself as much as possible. So
As the title of our episode today suggests, we're talking about how the role of design and research in the civic tech space has changed over time. Why is it important for us to acknowledge and talk about that?
job titles, by and large, are still reflecting functional expertise. For example, we still have like UX designers, and we still have content strategists, researchers, and so on. A thing that we're seeing now, though, is a lot more like strategic system-oriented design specialists that are getting embedded throughout this service delivery and the human-centered design kind of stack and lifetime of projects. So we have designers who are shaping services, and they're also shaping how government teams function and deliver with each other. The shape of design in the industry is shifting, right? And it's becoming more embedded. So at the end of the day, our goal has to be to drive better results for the public as civic tech designers. But then, if that's true, design leaders in our space, people like me and my peers, like we have to start talking about and like advocating for some of those shifting roles, those shifting responsibilities with clients. And then also, like I was talking about before, you have to start developing that in your staff, like in your teams, so that as the roles shift over time, we have the people that are available to do that work.
One such shift that I've noted is one from general roles to those that are more specialized. For example, folks focusing on service design, content strategy, or user experience research. How do you see this shift affecting the way teams are put together?
Yeah, this is a great question. That shift in the designer roles that you're describing, I see it moving upwards and outwards. So that move out from functional roles to the more specialized one, like we're saying, those broader topic and domain expertise roles. So if you, as you mentioned, like service design, so we can see, and we are seeing a shift from, let's say, like a focus on the customer journey, to a focus on the entire developer experience. Maybe we're talking about content strategists and we're moving from guiding maybe the creation or the delivery, the governance or whatever of useful content to then doing the same thing in like highly targeted benefits delivery programs with a lot of policy implications. Or maybe it's a UX researcher. So yes, responding to and developing and designing for user needs and behaviors in like a specific delivery context, but then we see them working across much larger domains, like much larger client spaces, in some cases, multiple client spaces. So, yeah, overall, like that shifting expectation within design teams, that are things that we're designing for, the experiences, the services are getting a lot more entrenched, more larger, like more widely developed. So there's also that need, uh, less for general roles, but more for this holistic project knowledge, right? Domain expertise in the people that are working on our programs, because we want to make sure that those teams are like focused on human-centered outcomes from the start to the finish. So we need that shift to happen.
As we shift to areas with more specialized focus, that could mean more overhead and keeping a team organized with folks kind of consisting of those specializations. How do your teams make sure those roles are properly integrated?
Yeah. Operations is a favorite topic of mine, so I appreciate this. A big part of keeping all of those teams organized is anticipating needs. So I'll give you an example. About 5 years ago at Nava, we made design operations a director level role. So the frame that we used at that point was what are the operations, the processes, the run books, the plays, whatever you want to call them, that we need now so that when our team doubles in size, and I think at that point when we were having this conversation, we were, say, maybe 35, 40 people. When we get to 70, or when we get to 90 or whatever, and we're at 100 now, what are the things that we need in place so that when we get to that point, everything is already set up and it's running smoothly? So we needed a lot more operational rigor, even when we were smaller, as we continue to grow and then let those internal changes kind of pay off and we grow into it. So those design ops leaders at Nava, some of them exist at the director level, others are within our programs themselves. They are responsible for things like just ensuring efficiency in how we're doing research, how the team's growing, or removing blockers so that other designers can focus on the craft of the job and the client services. So it's really this like layer of internal leadership, like operational infrastructure, so that we can support design across the whole company. And the hope, of course, is that as design operations is integrated strongly, then again, like designers can integrate into their own roles. They can focus on stuff that they want to focus on more effectively.
From what you're describing, we're delving into things that require some strong leadership skills, particularly as folks with these are spread out across large or multidisciplinary teams, and they find themselves in a place where they have to advocate for user-centered practices, maybe even with partners. How is Nava invested in design leadership skills and development?
Another topic near and dear, and you're probably hearing that in some of the things that I'm saying. Our design team and our company, the work's complexity just keeps getting larger and larger. So we do have design leaders who are taking on those new roles, new responsibilities, again, to make sure that human-centered design and research is at the center of all of the things that we do. So in addition to like design direction, we have design leaders who are focusing on things like facilitation, strategy, brand strategy, for example, like those organizational connections. They're operating at this intersection between the delivery work that we're doing and then there's also people management, which is another frame as well. So we have a number of internal communities of practice that folks either lead or participate in content strategy community of practice or front end community of practice, which help to cultivate leadership, cultivate development. And then we also have things like Design Salon, which is kind of like our internal forum for designers to connect with each other, like build their skills, sometimes reflect on our work and reflect on our failings and our successes, share inspiration and so on. In those forums, in those places, that's how we can invest in, that's how we can build teams, like we can build leadership skills, we can develop the designers that we have.
It sounds like there that you're creating both operational and social systems to kind of create a optimal environment for leadership growth. So that leads me to wonder is so as you've created this delivery environment, how has that shaped strong leaders there?
To tell a story slash give an example, about 5 years ago, maybe more now, what is time? Nava won a contract to build out a new paid family medical leave system in Massachusetts. So that system, extremely proud of it, and that has quickly become what we consider to be the gold standard for paid leave systems in the US. Um, as a company, we've talked about that program. We've talked about the successes of it, how we've delivered benefits to folks in the state of Massachusetts. But another frame here is how that program has helped to shape some of the specialized designers that we have on the team today. So very clearly, like this wasn't just a product design job. It wasn't a few wireframes and a design system. The designers on that team, they had to understand stuff like policy that had just recently been written in the state and signed into law. They had to do research across a ton of different stakeholders. It was like inside and outside government. Sometimes research with folks who English was their second language or not their language at all. Maybe Haitian Creole was the only language that they spoke, which is a interesting research facet. But then they're also doing stuff like using Lucid Chart and other tools to map out all of the eligibility rules and the workflows. And then that is forcing designers to think like policy analysts, forcing them to think like content strategists when maybe that isn't their title. So anyway, it was like a success internally as we got so many people to deliver on that work. But then from there, we have this large number of designers who have gone on to lead similar work on other programs. Some have become directors. Others have become trusted advisors to other paid family medical leave clients. Like we were talking about before, like that's a shift from that hyper focus on craft. Like it isn't just user experience design anymore. It's client management. It's that policy domain expertise. Having those types of delivery environments, like that's a way that we can build these strong leaders.
At a company like Nava, where really the core business is around working with others, with other organizations, I imagine you have the additional challenge of bringing those partners along for the journey. How have you and your teams approached educating and advocating around specialized design roles in such partnerships?
It has to be a holistic approach, especially when we're talking about modernizing government services. A thing that we talk a lot about at Nava, and I think many will understand, is every facet of every level of government is all interconnected. And any of the design, the research, the HCD work that we do has to be there to support all of that so that that whole ecosystem can thrive. So being able to do that means we have to act as trusted partners to our clients and make sure that they're getting what they need. So that often means that the work that we take on, like it will have specific design roles already identified, like in the scope of work or in the RFP, the contracts that we sign. But then within that, there is room for us to make sure that we're staffing designers or we're staffing content strategists or front-end designers who are then comfortable advocating for those good design practices that are going to support that client ecosystem. So sometimes when it's about specialized design roles, we have the ability to advocate for them, to work when we do have a lot of client trust, work with them to make like recommendations about what design roles they might need in the future. What does the roadmap say, and how might this shift who we're staffing on this project? Um, or what is also really common, as with anything else, like we have a set contract and we have a set budget. And so how can we use our existing team to support them in new ways? Maybe things like having a designer on the team who can also deliver brand strategy or visual design work to a client who desperately needs that, but that wasn't explicitly part of the work to start with. But we're able to offer that even if it's not written explicitly into an agreement. So
When you have either individuals or maybe teams going on there, it sounds like you sometimes have that first element where it's like that building trust in order to be able to make that advocacy happen. What advice do you give those folks when they're first starting off and kind of building that trust and that design skill and advice that they would want to give?
you want to meet people where they are. Every designer has had that thing where I got some beautiful thing that they're going to design. It's going to be so great. The client is going to instantly approve this with their rubber stamp. Uh, Happens because that's not where the client is. We really need to meet them where they are and understand what their context is, understand what their own stakeholders are asking. Sometimes it's not the person that we're working with, but it's their boss. And so being able to understand that, that then allows, it frees us to be able to do research. It frees us to be able to ask more questions because we want to meet the client where they are. So that is a pretty consistent piece of advice internally at Nava. People will often use that phrase.
And I think as I hear you describe the act of that, it seems like the important bit is about asking the questions rather than kind of having the best idea to present. Am I along the right track of where you're going?
Yes, that is often it. There are some times in which a client will say, you don't have to ask questions anymore because you already know the answers. Give me the answer. That, though, very often comes with the trust that you've built. We've had client engagements and interactions where they come to us because they know we've answered similar questions and done solved similar problems for other people. And so that is a great way to kind of leapfrog. And you say, oh, we don't need to do foundational research here, or we don't need to ask those same questions, but you still want to understand what their own particular context is. And yeah, you're right. Like you want to ask the question first and then and take it from there.
I believe we've used the phrase human-centered design a fair number of times in this conversation, but it's something we've seen succeed and find its way into ever more digital services work. That in itself can bring fresh challenges. Designers can find themselves in varied environments, whether we're talking about data modernization, custom products, platforms, or even third-party tools like Salesforce. They can even be hopping into places like software developer experience, which I think is one you mentioned a little while earlier, or like big enterprise operations at like big firms.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a ton that I'm not thinking of in this moment. How do you see the field being impacted by designers being embedded in more and more of these different types of domains?
Yeah. As you're pointing out, designers are increasingly embedded in these really, really complex spaces. Work like, just to pick something from Nava's portfolio, right? Like building benefits portals or redesigning eligibility workflows, claimant experiences, like this sort of thing. Designers are having to operate across multiple domains, right? It's not just the design of the thing, it's the technical side of it. What can we actually physically do with the tools of the internet? It's like an interesting facet. Visually, can people read it? How do they interact with this thing? Is it clear? Policy, like you name it, right? All of those different domains. So to take some examples at Naba within the design team, we have product teams, right? So they're focused on stuff like building digital services for the public or for like an internal staff. Whatever they're building has to meet both the government agency needs, but then also the end user's expectations, which is well and good. So then Nava has embedded certified Salesforce designers. We know that quite a few government agencies, they're going to adopt Salesforce for things like case management or like their benefits administration. So the designers that we have embedded in those teams, like they're blending UX principles then with that platform expertise. So kind of combining domains, and that in turn then is a more user-friendly and human-centered like interface with this standardized enterprise framework, the Salesforce design system or whatever. So that would be one example. Another is like we have platform teams. So this is building the shared platforms for boosting developer productivity or engineer productivity across like a bunch of multiple product teams, or kind of this infrastructure layer. One thing that we're particularly proud of at Nava is we have a growing number of developer experience designers. So they're really focused on the internal systems, like the workflows that are used by engineers. And their primary focus is developers as core users of systems, which isn't a frame or a domain that people immediately think of when they think of civic technology or government services. So the designers are doing things like tooling, right? They're building out human-centered documentation, designing technical environments that support those engineers or support the developers. So overall, we're seeing that role shift towards bringing human-centered design into more specialized environments, and that then in turn is leading to hopefully better outcomes for the clients that we serve.
I think that's a good segue to talk a bit about like the career itself coming up. And maybe I'll start with something more general with that, which is how do you feel about the direction things are going with the design field?
A big question. The design field, it's been in flux since way before I started. I took one graphic design class in college, And the teacher at that time taught us how to do typesetting with one of those flat, uh, like graphite pencils in order to map out where the paragraphs would go on the page, on like vellum or whatever. We don't do that anymore, thank goodness. It's all Figma. Another example would be it's what, 200 plus years since the Bauhaus started. And for anybody who doesn't get the reference, I'll just explain quickly. Like the Bauhaus's core objective was really radical at the time that they were created. They wanted to, this is very lofty, but they wanted to reimagine the material world to reflect the unity of all arts or something like that. So imagine this kind of like utopian meld of stuff like painting, architecture, sculpture, and they wanted to make this like single creative expression. So we'll recognize the look and the feel of it in a lot of design and so on that we have today, right? The minimalism, the strong grids, like sans serif type. So there's so much influence from the Bauhaus movement in the design industries till today. That was like this cultural movement that happened. And that was also a reaction, the Bauhaus, to all of the destruction, like the chaos after the First World War. So the design industry has been in flux for much longer than I've been alive. And like I'm old enough to have seen the widespread adoption of the internet. Um, and I remember when responsive web design first hit the scene, and that completely shifted how we did everything. So I talk a little bit about this in my book. The things that we build for the internet are these cultural products. So when we make them, they help to mediate our social activities. They mediate our aesthetics. Again, in the case of the Bauhaus, um, the rules of our society in sometimes pretty strange ways. So I do think the design field has and will continue to like have this role to play in defining like what's valuable for our society, and then making sure that people have access to those things. So yeah, one of the joys of getting to work at Nava is I get to be a part of helping to mediate those cultural products and like using them for good. Just as a quick example, like we worked with the state of New Jersey to modernize their unemployment insurance systems. So that's where the research and design work, the technology work that we're doing is helping more residents get access to their benefits, which is a culturally and socially mediated good.
That leads me to a follow-up, and to the level that you're comfortable speculating. One could assert that we're living in a time of change and chaos, not too dissimilar for the generation of the World War One. Different, but maybe similar in its how chaotic and how much change there is. Do you feel out there or foresee a sort of movement like that, do you think, in our future in response to the kind of the times we live?
That is such a great question. Ah, this is a little bit out of the blue, but I do look at the way that like internet memes, for example, spread and the absurdist nature of some things that are hilarious in their own way. The brain rot memes, for example, they seem to expose like how absurd all of this is, how much sludge there is on the internet to begin with. So there's something in our like design culture which maybe can reflect all of that. Um, but then I also see, on the other hand, this strong move away from like trying to artisanally make everything and using like the fact that there is so much chaos or that there's so many inputs or that you have to configure all of these different APIs to link to this thing. So therefore, we need standardized design systems. We need USWDS or we need like the Lightning design system because it's just too many things to think about. So it's almost like we've standardized away many of the boring parts of design, and instead we want to focus on other things. So perhaps that's a reaction to the chaotic movement that we're in is like, I don't want to make a button anymore. I want it just to be within the design system that I'm using.
Oh, I think that's an interesting observation. In a way, the two things you mentioned could be connected in some way. It occurs to me. In a way, like the meme stuff is maybe about getting rid of some of the boring stuff in quotes about communicating, right? It's like I want to communicate this like powerful idea I have written or I'm feeling, but and without a ton of effort to write something long. And a design system is kind of maybe a similar thing. I might be trying to connect things that are a little disparate, but
No, I think that's right. The amount of brain power that it takes to operate in today's society is very high. Many of us have 17, 18 different windows open at the same time. I have two monitors right now. So the technology, the content, right, all of this context. And so, yeah, our role as designers is in hopefully helping to reshape some of that away and automate some of that complexity away so people don't have to deal with it. And we see that in things like the focus on administrative burden, how to make it easier for people to access benefits, like how do we get rid of that noise? But then, yeah, perhaps internet subcultures kind of relish the noise, and that is part of who they are, is how can I make this as noisy and absurdist as possible? So, yeah,
one of the maybe the things out there that's causing some of the chaos, depending on who you talk to, is AI, and it's certainly something that impacts the design ecosystem. What do you think about that impact of AI on the design ecosystem, and how do you foresee roles emerging from that?
definitely still early days. Want to acknowledge that. I am not an expert in this at all, and I can speak specifically from the design ecosystem perspective. But design, capital D design, has, I think, always been most powerful when people lead, designers and others like lead with strategy and lead with narrative. And we are at our best, we're great systems thinkers, we're great storytellers. And AI is just like many other tools, right? So designers can use it maybe to boost productivity in certain areas. They want to use it as a way to process information, or maybe we generate new information based on patterns that we decide on. So I think that's a real immediate impact I see in my team and then in the industry generally is it's still early days, but I still look to designers' ability to lead with like a human-centered strategy with human narratives about the work that we're doing. That is a superpower that I don't think is going to disappear anytime soon. Like that will not get automated away, the ability to tell a good story and to have a real human narrative. It will, AI as a tool, have an impact on the design industry and our ecosystem in general. This is inevitable. I know that many leaders at the state and federal level, like they're working through all of the different policy implications, the contractual implications, staffing implications when it comes to AI, like in their own ecosystems and in their the vendor ecosystems. So just a like random example that I saw recently, Nava has a team, or the Nava team was at NASWA, which is the National Association of State Workforce Agencies. So they had a conference recently, and the state of Indiana was there. They presented, for instance, that they used AI to rewrite something like 700 user-facing communications, so stuff like decision notices, and they rewrote it all into plain language using AI in like 3 months, versus what they would have had to do if they did it manually, which was a 10-year process. So there is a supercharging, right? Like the generating things from preset patterns that we see happening at the client level, which I think is really powerful. And uh, as a company, I think we want to continue to help our clients work through that. We want to apply the technology in a like a thoughtful, ethical way. So yeah, but definitely still early days.
I love that Indiana anecdote. It sounds like something that was, pretty easy to scope out, like where the bounds of it are. Pretty predictable, like what you're after, and you have a strong model, like plain language.gov is a thing. You could, use it as input to the model, and I feel like most people aren't really looking forward to rewriting these sorts of email communications. So it seems like a really valid and good use of that kind of technique.
Yeah. And think about the impact as well on the team. You have a team who's dreading this pile of paper that's sitting in the corner, and it just like it gets bigger and bigger, and the problem gets larger and larger, and everybody like kind of doesn't look at it when you walk in the office every day. But now there's a technology which allows us to quickly get rid of that pile of paper. Like it removes the blocker. And now I don't have to wince every time I walk past anymore well, now we can use that corner for the new coffee machine. Or so there's all of these other second order impacts that I think can, if you kind of walk through the narrative a little bit, you can see how tools like AI can help to really benefit the teams as well. Like they have more time with constituents, they have more time, things like training and development.
For folks that are, maybe coming into the scene now or soon and are going to be kind of those early career folks seeking to go into design, what advice would you give them as they're getting going?
I have been asked this question before. I have a particular answer. I come from much more of a graphic design, interactive design, marketing design background. That's what I came up in the industry. A lot of that experience that I have has been very hard won, either on the job or self-taught. I definitely didn't start out with a lot of the grounding and fundamentals of things like type or grids or layout. Like I had to fight through that thicket myself and with bosses and coworkers and so on. So as you can imagine, I have been a hiring manager for quite a while at Nava and other places. I've looked at a lot of portfolios, a lot of early career designers' portfolios and their work and the things that they delivered. And I see it, with the people on my team as well who are early in their career. A consistent thing that I see is the same thing that I struggled with, which is like poor typography choices, poor layout choices, poor choices in iconography or color. It's inadvertent. Like nobody's going out to be like, I'm going to make this look bad unless you're one of those absurdist meme lords on the internet, right? But the presentation of the thing, if it is poor, then it detracts from the great research that the person is presenting, or it detracts from the really critical service design work that they're doing or that they're trying to explain. It like hides the substance of the design work behind this really shoddy facade. My advice is quite simple in that way. Get good at using type, understand grids, like know how to generate a good grid that is flexible across a lot of different contexts, like choose colors that are accessible, but then also expressive. Um, Understand layout and balance on the page, like on the screen. Layout choices in a Google Doc are going to be very different than the choices we make in a PowerPoint slide or an interactive screen. So those are the types of things that I think people need to get good at early because it sets the foundation for all of the other great work that they can do.
It sounds like, as you described there, those fundamentals, it sounds a bit like someone should be good at those because you don't want them to get in the way of the higher order stuff you're trying to like. Maybe it's like the more interesting thing you're trying to get to, but without the fundamentals, you stumble, for lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah, that's right. Uh, Everyone has been in a presentation, and I mean virtually. So you're sharing your screen, and maybe somebody has their camera on, and they do that thing where they lean into the screen because they can't read the thing that you're sharing. That, like, you don't want that. You want somebody to be able to relax in their chair and just read the information that you're presenting. It's not too much. And I understand we're juggling windows and all sorts of spreadsheets and so on, but getting those fundamentals down then just frees you up for so many other things. Making sure that the colors don't clash frees you up for so many things. So yeah, it really is like just the basics.
As we get to the tail end here, where can others learn more about you and the all the work you're doing at Nava?
Well, of course, would advise people to visit our website, visit our public benefit report, which we published for a number of years and talks in great detail about our work and the outcomes that we've had for clients. So that's a great resource as well. Obviously, you can visit my website and people can reach directly on LinkedIn or via email and so on. And yeah, we'll just appreciate anybody taking a look at the work we do at Nava. We're really proud of it.
Oh, and as a follow-up, way early in our conversation, you mentioned your book, Cross-Cultural Design. Is that something people can find out there in the world if they're interested?
Yes, I should have mentioned that. So yes, it's out there. You can go to bookshop.org and there's a link there. And yeah, would also love to have people look at that and comment or another piece of work that I'm really proud of.
Sonongo, thank you so much for joining us here on Civic Tech Chat. I've no doubt from our conversation, folks will find a gem to kind of bring into their day and maybe into their work.
Great. Thanks, Ryan.
Visit us on the web at civictech.chat or subscribe to us for content updates wherever it is you download your podcasts.